Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Our next speaker today is Peter Merrick. He's a trust and estate practitioner with the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners. He has also written for one of the largest CPA publications in North America and has a background in education. And he also knows a lot about succession. And he is here today to pass on some of his insights to you. So I will hand the floor over to you, Peter. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I just want to share with our audience. I want to thank you so much for being on this call today. I've been attending these meetings myself for close to 25 to 30 years when I was a young stockbroker and money manager. So I feel very honored that I'm being on this call today. I want to share a little background on myself and share with you what we're going to be talking about. It's the forgotten asset. My expertise is in risk management and in financial planning. When people are starting out, they're focused on wealth accumulation. And then when they get older, it's wealth management and then it's wealth distribution. So when I was a university professor, one of the things I had a problem with were the textbooks were outdated. So I decided to write my own textbooks. And my first book was called The Individual Pension Plan Handbook. And when I wrote that, I forgot to ask the most important question. Why would someone actually create their own pension plan? And the answer was simple. They were planning their exit. The time then that they were no longer going to give their labor for work, but they were going to receive the benefits of their work. And that led me to write the task, which was for advisors and also advisors seeking knowledge. And I just want to share with you that these were comprehensive books that were written for the advisor, for the lawyer, for the fiduciary. And these were large textbooks, and they were all published by LexisNexis. The issue I had was I wasn't writing and I hadn't written for the public. So my last book, which was The King of Main Street, it was on succession planning, it was on wealth distribution, wealth management, and at the same time, and wealth is a big term, it's not just your portfolio. So each of these books, when I finished them, they actually caused me to ask another question. So what we're going to be talking about today is my upcoming book, something that's a portion of it, and it starts with gold. And I just want to share with you the premise before we move on. It's about gold being something solid, but it also is de-risking your life, your investments, and also rematerializing it, making it more real. Because a lot of us are very concerned with the things that are happening around the world. And all we can do is look back at history. And from looking back at history, what we're able to do is we're able to not know what the future is going to be, but we can understand that human beings behave the same way. And if any of you have ever watched the movie with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore called 50 Dates, basically the premise is Drew Barrymore wakes up every day and she's forgotten everything from the day before. And that is what, unfortunately, humanity is. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just a history not studied. So I'd like to share with you my first graph. You can see this pie chart right now, and this is the entire S&P 500. And you can see that 50% of all the stocks are concentrated in all these companies that you know. These companies, many people feel that they're much too overvalued. And many of the other companies, they really haven't had that growth. So this is where we are right now. We are in a situation where very few companies actually move the market. And many people are conserved. And it's almost like the greater fool. And what that is in the financial industry is you know that things are overpriced, but you're hoping that you buy it and you will be able to get out and find someone who's a greater fool and will buy you out and you will reap the benefits of it. So this is something that's very concerning for many people in the financial industry because the entire market can move by a change in any of these companies. Now I want to show this to you because this I found very interesting. This happens to be bank liabilities, or what they would call assets. And I want to show you this portion. This is 2008. This little section here shows, and you can see Held to maturity, this would be bonds, and this would be fixed income products. This would be mortgages. And you could see right at around 2008, when we had the last a major market correction where the entire, people were very frightened about what was happening. You can see it's a small dip compared to now. So you can see that held to maturity, most of these bonds and mortgages that are being held by the banks right now, they're underwater if they were to be sold or if they went to maturity. And basically what that means is we all know that we benefited from low interest rates. The problem is the bonds and what they're using to back all these securities with are at a lower interest rate. So in essence, if you've studied bonds or fixed income, if interest rates go up, what you can sell a bond for or a mortgage goes down. And this is something that we should be concerned with because we haven't seen this in a very long time, if we've seen it ever. So this is just something to take into consideration because I'm building up to showing you how you can actually mitigate your risks. So this chart I find very interesting. A friend of mine gave it to me, and it just shows 1929. Remember, I was sharing with you that we don't know what the future is, but we can look towards the past. And you can see up until September 2nd, 1929, which is the day before they call it Black Tuesday, where the market started falling. And you can see that it fell. And when it actually fell to its bottom, it took about 20 years for it to recapture itself. Now, as I shared with you, that most of the market right now is concentrated in those stocks. So you're going to find good companies that have real earnings, not just capital appreciation because the total assets that the company is, sorry, assets with, oh, I lost you guys. Can you see me right now? Let me
Yeah,
go.
we can see you.
Okay, did my screen disappear?
No, I could still see that too.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, for some reason it just went blank. I am an immigrant to technology, so I'm always getting used to it. So I want to share with you something that I find very concerning. Back in 2008, when we saw that little blip, uh, the governments of the world introduced bank bailouts. And many people were upset about it. And basically what it is, I've got the definition here, but it's when the government took tax dollars and they put it into these companies to keep them afloat because they were very frightened that the entire system was going to stall because there wasn't enough cash in the system. So it's called a bailout. That's when you take tax dollars, money, and you put it into the financial system. One thing that I'm concerned about is since 2010, countries around the world have been introducing legislation that most people are not aware of, bail-ins. And this is where a bank will take, if it's failing, it's having problems, what it does is it will take depositor money, it will take basically all these assets of everyone who's invested in the bank, having CDs and having savings accounts, and they will take that money and they will issue you paper, but you will no longer have your money. Now, again, all we can do is look at history. In 2013, in Cyprus, there was a financial crisis, and they seized all the bank accounts over $100,000, and they issued paper, and people were in shock. Now, there's something called normalcy bias. Just because you haven't witnessed it before in your own lifetime does not mean that things can't change dramatically. I believe it was Lenin. I'm not a fan of Lenin because I'm a capitalist, but he said there are decades that nothing happens. With you, my expertise is risk mitigation. People come to me. I use the analogy that I'm the relief pitcher playing for a National League baseball team, meaning I don't go up the bat. I show up at the end and I help my clients maintain their money, their wealth, reducing taxes and making sure that they are in the most secure types of structures and done the most prudent planning so they'll have their money. They've made their money. I'm not in the business of making people money. I'm in the business, I would call myself a Sherpa, helping them come down from the mountain and making sure that they're secure and they have a good retirement and the people and the things they care about will be funded when they're no longer here. Now, I want to give you a few examples because it's a strong thing I just said about the bail-ins. You can see here, I just have the list of all the countries, the large countries, along with the European Union. They all implemented legislation for bail-ins. That means every single bank, if there's a problem, the legislation that's been passed in all these countries, they can actually seize bank accounts. And I know that gets a lot of people very concerned by being able to say it, but this is legislation that was passed on the books. It's not being used, but it can be used. And that's something just to be aware of. And I just have a list of those countries and the acts. And again, I would make my PowerPoint available for anybody. Everybody knows about the FDIC. This is where you have depositors in banks have $250,000 insured, and this gives us a level of security. This was implemented with the bank crisis that happened back in the 30s. It's covering about $10 trillion. The number that concerns me is there's only $120 billion. So you have a $10 trillion liability, and you only have $120 billion to cover it. So if there was a problem with banks, there is a possibility. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but the bail-in legislation is there, and people who are actually there, their accounts could be switched over for stock or paper of those institutions that are having financial issues. So I just wanted to share that with you. So what I look at in my business, and this is what my book that I'm working on right now, which is called It Starts with Gold. And as I shared with you, when I say start with gold, it's the commodity. It is also a metaphor for de-risking your life and at the same time and your asset and your portfolio, while at the same time rematerializing your life. And for example, I look at the worst case scenario. In my planning career and what I would teach my students for years, I would ask them to ask themselves 3 questions. What is the best case scenario? So if the best things happen in your life, what would you have? What's the status quo scenario? And if you keep on doing what you're doing and things keep on going the way that they're going, where will you be? And then I ask the worst case scenario. And once we ask the worst case scenario, and this is where I get brought in, is how do we mitigate that risk? Because I have to go and play with that. That's why people go and say that I'm a really bad pill at a party, because when I walk in, that's what I get brought in to do, looking at the worst case scenario, making sure that it's not going to be my clients or it's going to be as mitigated as much as possible. So what this is right here is I put together a list with a number of experts on if things were to go bad in the financial market, what would be the last thing standing? And you can see that the last things that would be standing would be cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency would be the first thing gone because it's completely dematerialized. It's completely built on the power grid and everything. And then you got derivatives, you've got CDs, T-bills, fiat money. You've got mutual life insurance companies, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. You got gold and silver. And this is a stat that a friend of mine gave me, which is very concerning for me. And it shows that if assets were to collapse, or how does it look? You've got gold and silver, then you've got land, and then you've got other commodities, and then you have paper currencies, and that basically is how much currency is out there in the world. You've got government bonds, you got equities and bank deposits, you got anyone or anything that cannot pay debts, which is $300 trillion. And there's so much derivatives out there. Everything out there in the financial market is someone is asking someone to insure them. And in essence, the number that I've seen is something that I can't even imagine. When I was a kid, I couldn't, I didn't know what $1 trillion was. Now, the US government is over $35 trillion in debt. And that is something that I could not imagine. If I was to travel a minute, sorry, a mile a minute, and I was to go to the stars, it would be about 35,000 years of travel. That's really what, to give it a perspective. It's something that's beyond my capability of understanding. So I want to share with you right now the forgotten asset. And we're going to be moving on to this, and I hope to have time to ask questions, but I want to share with you that I put my website. I've made it really difficult for all of you. It's petermerrick.com. So if you have any questions, you can contact me there. But the forgotten asset, and it's life insurance. Because if you're not going to be buying gold and silver and taking possession of it, and you're going to remain in the financial markets, I want to share with you that insurance is something you should look at, but we're going to get specific and granular and talk about the differences of them. So the forgotten asset is life insurance. It is a government policy because it's in the tax codes, it's in tax acts around the world. The government knows what it does. They know what it does. And the history of it was that it was protect widows and orphans. And it was for minimum payment, and you would replace a person's life. However, if you have a lot of money, you can drive a truck through it and you can receive all the benefits from it. And it also has different features that you don't have at a brokerage firm and you don't have at another financial institution. And I want to focus on that. So I want to just, as I mentioned to you before, that I look at the difference between insurance companies and banks, because believe it or not, most of them have the same types of investments, but the requirements on the reserves are so much different. Because back on March 26, 2020, the Federal Reserve removed all requirements. That means none of the banks need to have reserves, meaning that they need to keep on taking on deposit and participating in what's called the fractional banking system, actually stay afloat because they don't have to keep any reserves. That means they can keep on lending money out and there's nothing to back. And I know that's very concerning, but this is what was passed by the Federal Reserve back in March 26, 2020. Life insurance are different. They have to keep reserves because they have different requirements under their legislation. And it makes a huge difference. So the question is, when you're going to have your money either at a bank or a brokerage firm, you have to be aware that perhaps if your money is not custodial, you can lose access to your money. So it's just something to keep in mind. So you've got life insurance, the reserves are much different, and you can see that for their liabilities that the actuaries calculate, they have to keep at least 100% of that. It makes a huge difference in its security. So most people think life insurance is boring, and guess what? It's called insurance because it's for the worst times. Now I want to share with you something about Be the Casino. And what that is there's two types of life insurance companies. Everyone knows that Warren Buffett, he's done really well. The cornerstone of his portfolio happens to be life insurance companies. And what happens is there's a great return, and there's things that are built into it that I'm going to talk about in a second. And that means that the profits go to the shareholders. In a mutual life insurance company, what that is the profits go to policyholders. They are not on the market because it's a private company owned by the policyholders. And in essence, when a company makes money, you benefit if you own those, you own it. And in essence, Buffett loves these companies, says he'll never sell it because he knows how it works, because there's something that you don't know that's not correlated to the markets. So what, as I mentioned, Warren Buffett loves these these types of investments, because these policies, what happens if you own a participating life insurance policy, when they're going to quote you, and I'm going to use an example of like what the internal rate of return is, what's going to happen is they are not going to show you what the lapses are. And what that is people cancel their policies, and this is not correlated to what's happening in the market. So in essence, when they're doing projections of what the policy is going to earn, what's going to happen is you're going to get that money of people who cancel. So I'll give you an example. If there's a mutual life insurance company that had a bunch of grandparents buy participating life insurance policies for the kids, let's be honest, a 25-year-old receives a policy from the grandparent and has $30,000 in it, and they can cash it in. They cashed it in. What happens is, as I was sharing with the reserves, the money that's set aside, that's released, and that money gets paid as a dividend. So the longer you're in these policies, you could earn, and I've seen policies that earn up to 15% tax-free within the policy, because that's the other thing. It's tax-free, the growth. And that is so powerful. And I'm gonna use a very conservative example based on the lowest dividend that I could find being paid into a policy. And this happens to be the rate. It's life insurance dividend rate, 6.1%. Now, at the top tax rate, that's equivalent to you earning 9.68. And if you're in the state of California, which I'm in, it's equivalent to earning, oh, my screen is actually blocking what I'm looking, 11.17%. And that's a great rate of return. Now, if it's higher, and I believe that they will be higher, and I've seen policies that have earned tax-free 15.88%, and these were a little more aggressive policies. They were using an index which had a base of that the worst you could do is 0, and it had an upside. For the last 20 years, it did 15.88. However, this is a very conservative amount, but you can see the benefits of using a life insurance policy. So I just want to recap. If you have a mutual life insurance company, that means when people lapse, you will get a bump in your return that has nothing to do with the bonds, the stocks, the real estate that they own. And the money within there grows tax-free. What you are also able to do is you're able to use it as to get loans out of it tax-free. So what you're able to do is you take money, you put it in there, it grows tax-free, you can access it tax-free. And if it's properly structured, you can die tax-free. So I want to emphasize that if you haven't looked at something like this, and not all companies are the same, it's something that I would highly recommend, especially in the economy, that there's a lot of uncertainty and we do not know what the future is. As I shared before, we have to look at it, the worst case scenario. And if you're going to be investing, this is something that you should look at. And I want to share with you something really interesting, because this is really popular based on that theme, and I just want to share it with you. It's something that was put together by the Rockefellers, and it's something that it's become very popular because people are finally starting to understand it. I was a university prof. I taught accountants, I taught CFAs, and I also taught CFPs. And none of them wanted to sell insurance. They all wanted to get into selling something exciting like stocks and things like that. However, going back to Buffett, it is something that is powerful and has the greatest opportunity to make money, and it's safe and it's boring. And if you're going to be in the financial system and you're not going to buy gold and take possession of it, it's something you should consider. So let's just go over what the waterfall method is, and then I will take questions. It's designed to safeguard a family's wealth. What it involves is you open up a trust, you put your money in it, and again, until 20, 26, you're able to put a lot of money into a trust to gift it. And what happens is you can get policy loans. And what that is you can get that money and live off of it tax-free, and it's not paid off until you're dead. And you don't have any underwriting requirements because it's built into the policy. And the policy loans that are built in are about anywhere from 4.5 to about 5%. And this is accredited to the cash value. So this is a way that you can live tax-free. But what happens is they keep on putting members of the family into these trusts and they buy the policies, and that's how they live. And when they pass on, I don't know how to say it best, when they're no longer here, the the loans are paid off, and the additional money that comes from the policy goes back in the trust, and you keep on doing this in generation and generation and generation. And the end result is you're able to pass on money effectively for generations. And here's a question I would ask. Does anybody here know who their great grandparents are? I don't. But what would it be like if you had actually created something like this and your great grandchildren get a check every year? You live on forever. We all lose the battle. However, my focus in my career is actually having you win the war, and that is longevity. And that's not longevity to be able that you don't eat cat food while you're alive. You actually live the life you want. And at the same time, you leave a legacy that you choose. And that happens by taking proactive steps and making it happen today. And I am done my presentation, and I think we have uh, perhaps one or two questions, as long as we're permitted to stay on the call.
Yes, you are permitted. And we do have some questions. Would you recommend any specific type of insurance, like whole life, variable, Kaizen, leverage insurance?
I'm going to go and hold to, unless I know the person's situation and what they're trying to achieve, I'm going to be very careful, because one of the things that I do is I subscribe to a planning strategy where I look at what's your goals, what do you have, what's the gap, what are your options. We put together something down in paper, we take action, we have to review it. So in essence, I look at it as holistic. I have to look at your situation and to look at what's best. I can't recommend something specific, not knowing your situation.
Okay. Um, and then somebody else wants to know, there is a history of life insurance companies going bankrupt, like Executive Life. How do you find the safest company?
That is a really good question. And in essence, you have to read their financials. Now, let me share with you something that no one ever thinks about it, because I'm somewhat of a nerd. Every every bond, every GI, every CD, every bank account, it's only as good as the contract. You have to read the contract. So you have to know what you're protected. That's number one. Number two, they do have a fund, but it's just as bad as the one we were showing for the banks. So you have to read the contracts. You also have to look at the health and see what they're invested in. And in essence, I spend time researching the different companies because, again, as I showed earlier, if you have a cascading event, you want to make sure that you're as high up on the shore if a tsunami comes in. So again, it's not going to a website and saying this is the cheapest price or this. You have to do your due diligence. And a lot of the contracts and the financial reporting, these things are hundreds of pages, some of them, and someone has to read it. And the problem is, most people assume that the advisors they're dealing with have read it. And I've got to share with you, they haven't.
And what do you think about fixed index annuities? Annuities are like insurance products, but they have a bad reputation. So what are your thoughts on that?
It really depends on the individual. Some people think it's the greatest thing in the world. I was speaking to uh, a woman whose father was an insurance agent, and she teaches yoga at one of the most posh clubs in North America. And her father sold an annuity product back in 1981, a large one, about $300,000. And they're getting about 18% a year plus principal back for the rest of their life. The insurance company makes every few years to make sure they're still alive. And that person went to this individual saying, your father gave us our lifestyle. So it depends on the individual. Some people love insurance, some people don't. Now, I look at insurance that it has many of the benefits of investments. At the same time, it's like driving with a safety belt and with airbags. And on top of that, it also does something else. It actually has a benefit at the end. After you're gone, someone's going to get something and it's going to pay out and it's only as good as the contract. And you need someone who knows the contracts, who also reads the financial statements and has the ability to read them.
We are out of time, Peter, but I just want to make sure is the best way for people to get in touch with you through petermerrick.com?
It is the best place to get a hold of me. You can schedule a call if you have any further questions. And again, this has been fantastic. And I want to thank you so much for inviting me to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for putting a silver lining on a generally kind of morbid topic. I think we're all feeling a little bit better about the end. And thank you so much for your time.
I wish everyone on this call lived to 120 and never be unhealthy.
Yes, I think we all want that. All right, enjoy your day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.